On your Monday episode of Locked On Raptors, things seem to be coming together a little bit for the Raptors after a 1-1 weekend against the Celtics and Pistons. They're looking healthy, and their two best players seem to be figuring out how to coexist with one another in different spots on the floor. We'll get into that and a whole lot more as we break down the weekend on today's show. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, November the 20th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the website that's busted at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and of course, come hang out in our Discord server. The link for the Locked On Raptors Discord is in the description of the podcast. It's a great place to be. Lots of good folks in there talking ball, talking movies, talking all sorts of stuff in a very friendly, non-toxic environment. What a world, the internet, in a group setting to talk about a sport where it's not nasty all the time. I think you should join for that reason alone. It's also free to do. Link in the description again. It's always there, and would love to see you join us in our little Locked On Raptors family. You can also find the show for free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Please subscribe, follow, rate, review, hit the little notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode once it premieres. It's all good stuff, and it all makes me feel very good and strokes my ego and makes the show more popular in the algorithm and all that stuff. So thanks for doing all of that. All right, on today's show, breaking down a couple of games from the weekend for the Raptors, a narrow loss in the in-season tournament debut for the Toronto Raptors on Friday against the very good Boston Celtics. I think a mostly promising game. Yeah, you'd love to see Darko Rajakovic not foul out his own player, clearly schooled at the school of Taylor Jenkins, fouling out Jaren Jackson Jr. all the time on it, just kind of by his own will because he's scared of more fouls. Certainly happy with Pascal in this game. Game got a little away from the Raptors in the second quarter with Pascal sitting too long. And so, that's a concern, but it's also, a one-off game, and they lost by 3, and they had a really good Scottie Barnes look in the corner to try to tie it late in this one. Hard to be too upset about a narrow loss to the team that I think is the best in the NBA right now. You just completely wax the very bad Pistons. That was a nice thing to see. A nice little get well game for the Raptors. They get healthy as well. They quite literally get well with O.G. and Anunoby coming back. The shooting not there. Everything else absolutely there for O.G. This was a fun little weekend of hoop for your Raptors. And I think sets them up going into a very interesting week, which we'll talk about at the end of the show. Looking forward to what's on tap. Magic tomorrow, in-season tournament implications aplenty. Must win in the in-season tournament. That's cool. A must-win game in November. That's rad. I love the in-season tournament so much. You get the Pacers, you got the Bulls, you got all sorts of stuff coming up for the Raptors here. The Nets in just over a week's time as well, as they will round out their in-season tournament schedule. That's the recap of the weekend. Let's get into the nitty-gritty, shall we? We'll come into the show. We'll dig in off the top to Pascal and Scottie and some pretty promising signs, I think, from those two. Got a little on Jakob Poeltl, who had a really nice weekend. Got the game chain yesterday, which, funnily enough, for listeners of this show, it seems as though the game chain that they give out to the dude who did the stuff that Darko liked the most at the end of wins very much just seems like a version of the dude of the game segment that used to exist on this very podcast. So the influence spreading clearly. We got the good, the bad, and the from the weekend as well. But let's start off with the, I think, coalescing that has begun between the two best players on this Raptors team. And this is an important thing, of course. This entire season is going to be viewed through the lens of who fits with Scottie Barnes and how do all of these pieces sort of interconnect? What is the interplay? What is the best way to build this team around Scottie Barnes going into the future? That is the number one most important question. And Pascal Siakam, obviously, is a dude who's being evaluated in this very way. He's not been extended. He's a free agent coming into the season or going into the off season. It's, we all know the deal with Pascal at this point. And obviously the first couple games of the season did not exactly seem promising for the idea that Pascal Siakam and Scottie Barnes could work with one another in a complementary way. The concerns about overlap, the concerns about, occupying the same spaces on the floor, those were there. I kind of think this weekend, and a lot of games in this recent run, kind of going back to even the Dallas win where Pascal really went off. I'm starting to feel as though these two guys are figuring out where to be on the floor to complement one another and how they can each exist on the floor in a way that doesn't impede what the other guy is trying to do. And Darko Rajakovic, obviously, I think, has a big role in this as he has to deploy the players and tell them what to run and all this stuff. But it does feel like there's some comfort growing between Pascal and Scottie and how they play off of one another. We know, like, transition, those two dudes are incredible. They complement one another, obviously. They're running like maniacs. Scottie's finding Pascal. Pascal's finding Scottie. That's all good stuff. The half court, obviously, is where things have been more of a challenge. And the Raptors have not been a good half court team, although they're now second to bottom in the NBA in half court offense, surpassing the Portland Trailblazers. They're now like 4 points ahead of the Blazers, who I guess had a really bad weekend of half court offense. And they're right on the heels of 28th of the Memphis Grizzlies. So baby steps. It's looking great for the Raptors half court offense. A game in which they score 130 points per 100 possessions against the Pistons on Sunday will certainly buoy that number. They've been needing a buoying number like that for quite some time. For me, with Scottie and Pascal, obviously, again, like the sort of criticism of the two is, they occupy the same spaces. They can't work with one another. And I just kind of don't think that's been true so far this year. These guys are getting their looks. They're both, top two in the team in scoring. They're both around 20 points a game. Pascal, after a really rough start, true shooting wise, has, bounced back up closer to league average. The 3 points still kind of, banging, pulling his numbers down. But his 2-point scoring has been ludicrously good over the last little while here. That continued into the game against the Pistons, where it started off rough. Asar Thompson with some excellent post defense. And then, Pascal kind of figured it out as the game went along, finished with a nice 10 of 18, 23 to lead the team. And so let's just kind of dig into some of the different areas these guys are having success in and how they complement one another. First of all, like, this all gets easier because of Scottie Barnes' general everywhereness, right? The dude is doing everything all the time. He is a catch and shoot wizard right now. He can work as a pick and roll ball handler or as a pick and roll dive man. He obviously can create from the wings. And a big part of that is teams are now starting to close out on him because the 3-pointers keep on falling. Eventually, those scouting reports are going to change, and that's going to lead to a whole lot of attacking from the wings and Scottie Barnes getting downhill. We know Scottie can also post up, like that's part of his bag, but I think it's been less of his bag this season. He more sort of has those bully drives where he, sort of bobs and bounds his way into a good floater or a hook shot, and that's a perfectly viable way for him to run offense. And I just think we're seeing that there isn't that same clear overlap of these guys occupying the same spots on the floor. Pascal's pick and roll operation, way down. More than okay to funnel some of that towards Scottie Barnes, and Scottie's been one of their better pick and roll ball handlers so far this season. Siakam's post-up numbers, of course, are just like instant offense for this team. You throw it to him in the post, something's going to happen good, whether he scores on an individual matchup that he can cook, which is basically every matchup in the league at this point, or he's going to draw two, kick out, and there's going to be something good on the back end of that. Scottie Barnes is drawing two to the ball. Like, having two guys who can draw two to the ball, pretty good way to counter a lack of traditional spacing, because it just creates space for others just by the mere fact that two guys are converging on one player. It's how basketball works, and that's been nice to see. Pascal's post-up numbers, by the way, 1.17 points per possession on post-ups, 3.5 possessions a game. That's near the top of the league. He's 84th percentile in efficiency, and among players with more than 2 post-ups per game, which is, I think, nearly about 50 players. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I lost the page, but it's about 50 players. Pascal is 5th behind Anthony Davis, Jason Tatum, Karl Anthony Towns, and Kristaps Porzingis in post-up efficiency. He's been really bloody good there, and that is something Scottie Barnes does not do with the same level of efficiency. And I kind of think it's perfect that they're just kind of letting the post-up world be the world in which Pascal Siakam goes to work. Scottie, obviously, he's crushing it as a spot-up guy right now. 1.2 points per possession as a spot-up player. He's shooting 45% on 4 catch-and-shoot threes per game. That's bonkers. And obviously his pull-up mid-range has been a thing as well. And that's a thing that Pascal had a lot in his game the last couple seasons. That's been funneled more towards Scottie in terms of share of pull-up mid-rangers. Obviously, Pascal's going to get to his office. We saw it a few times against the Pistons. He's going to have those 10, 12, 14 footers that go up and are cash. But Scottie obviously is kind of using the pick and roll to navigate into those mid-range jumpers. And that's been a nice thing. And he's shooting 52% on pull-up twos, 3.8 a game. That's pretty impressive. All of this is bearing out in sort of the on-court impact numbers of Scottie and Pascal. Together, they've been really good. In particular, those two, Pascal, Scottie, and O.G. and Anunoby, those three guys together on the floor are winning their minutes just tremendously right now. Plus 14.4 net rating for the Pascal, Barnes, O.G. trio on the floor with one another. That balloons up to 34.6, plus 34.6 when Jakob Poeltl's not playing, which is interesting. We'll talk about Yak in a second. It's just like 78 possessions. It's not much, but the defensive rating with those three guys on the floor with no Jakob Poeltl is under 90. Really, really good stuff. Again, we're seeing Scottie kind of flex his muscles in all these different areas of the floor, and his three-point shooting has been massive. I think we all came into this season thinking, if Pascal can hit some threes, that's going to make things easier for everybody on this offense because you'll have Pascal and O.G. and Gary Trent Jr. able to hit threes, and that's a nice thing. Turns out it's just been the other way around, and Scottie Barnes has become the guy who's taking and making those threes. It's been tremendous. Is it going to be 39% all season long from deep? Is it going to be 45% on catch and shoots all year? We'll see. The early returns are very nice. The jump shot form looks incredible and all of that. But you've got two guys who are working in concert with one another, doing damage in different play types that are not overlapping with one another, and in fact kind of feed into one another if you start to get creative with it. They're finding ways of getting Siakam those really great deep seals, working off those cuts where he kind of throws it into Jakob Poeltl, cuts towards the basket, and Yak's throwing these gorgeous passes. There was one in that Pistons game, just this like gorgeous rainbow pass that just kind of flutters up and into Siakam's hands on the other side of the defender. He goes up and scores. They're finding ways to get both of these guys in the spots where they can be successful. Again, it gets way easier when Scottie Barnes is doing all he's doing on offense, but that's what stars do. Stars make life easier for everybody else. And, we're seeing obviously both guys really take part in the playmaking department as well. It's not like one guy is seeing his assist number hemorrhage because the other guy's racking them up. No, they're just both like walking into 5 or 6 assists every single night. And yeah, they lost to the Celtics on Friday. Yeah, Scottie didn't have an amazing game. I thought there was some pretty good process for him and some looks that he'd normally make that weren't going down. But all told, we're seeing that this team can work with those two guys as the two best players. The fit, obviously, and the context of the rest of the roster is what's going to be the real determining factor as to whether or not it's something you can go forward with long term. But they're making it work and figuring out a way to kind of coalesce with one another and not infringe upon each other's territory while they do it. That's been very promising. We're going to come back on the other side. And we're going to talk about Jakob Poeltl, talk about Dennis Schroder, Gary Trent Jr., who all kind of showed their value to lifting up this team over the weekend. Jak in particular had a really nice couple games. Dennis Schroder bouncing back after a couple really miserable games last week as well. We'll get into all that coming up in just 1 second. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about our good friends over at Prize Picks, the single best place to go and play daily fantasy sports. You got to check them out. It's really a fantastic thing because they've made it so simple and just the way it should be. You're not up against some sort of shadow expert when you're on Prize Picks. A lot of daily fantasy apps, you go in there, you make a roster, and you're up against some expert or some shadow team. You don't even know what it is. You haven't had the time to do all the algorithms and the projections to get it right. No, instead, Prize Picks is just you against their projections, and that is super simple. It's the way it should be. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players on a given entry, and whether they will get more or less than the projected stat in courtesy Prize Picks in whatever category it might be. If you get all 6 right, you can win up to 25 times your money on your Prize Picks entry. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second. That player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. You can also do cross-sport entries with the Specials League. You want to check out that. Maybe you want to, put together a projection of Travis Kelce receptions plus LeBron James three-pointers made. You can do that with Prize Picks. Go check it out right now. PrizePicks.com/LockedInNBA. Use the code LockedInNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's PrizePicks.com/LockedInNBA. Code LockedInNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, we continue breaking down the sort of big picture stuff from the 1-1 weekend against the Celtics and the Pistons. Let's dive into Jakob Poeltl, shall we? He was really good over the weekend. Friday in the game against the Celtics, 5 of 5, 11 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, a steal. And then against the Pistons, he got the chain like we talked about. 7 of 11 from the field. Sorry, I'm reading that wrong. I'm reading Scottie Barnes' line. 6 of 6 from the field. He hasn't missed a shot since last Wednesday. That's tight. 16 points, 10 boards, 4 assists, a steal, 3 blocks, and a plus 21 for Jakob Poeltl. And look, Jakob Poeltl is an imperfect fit on this team. We know this, right? Like this is a guy who is amplified when he's playing with a point guard who has a pull-up shot to open up that space in the middle of the floor for those short roll opportunities, and they just haven't had that this year. Dennis Schroder does not command players fighting over screens and pick and roll actions. Teams are going to go under. Sometimes he can burn them with their speed anyway, with his speed anyway. He can get to the rim, he can get those paint touches, and he can find guys in space kind of rolling towards the rim, but it's less easy. That said, Jakob Poeltl's making it work, and as sort of up and down as his season has felt, the numbers are pretty undeniable that Jakob Poeltl has been a positive force for this team. So far this year, per NBA.com's tracking data, 1.37 points per possession as a roll man, 79th percentile in the NBA. That's excellent. He's giving them real roll gravity and real roll finishing. Speaking of the finishing, you look at Jakob Poeltl, you think, oh, he's missing a lot of bunnies this year, isn't he? Not so. He's shooting 84.7% inside 3 feet. 84.7. That's incredible. That is by far a career high. It's not going to last that high. Obviously, that's an incredible number to be shooting at the rim. But Jakob Poeltl's doing it. Obviously, when he's on the floor, the Raptors are a much better rebounding team. That trio of Scottie, O.G, Pascal, obviously the numbers overall are better when it's just those three, no Yak. But when Yak's on the floor, this is one of the best rebounding teams in the NBA. They scoop up about 80% of the available defensive rebounds, and that fuels, obviously, the single best transition attack in the NBA. This was a really good weekend for reminding everybody why the Raptors traded for Jakob Poeltl. And again, I know it's imperfect. Long term, can he be the center on a team if you are going to invest in the O.G, Pascal, Scottie trio, which maybe they won't. Maybe they move on from Pascal and it makes Yak's fit that much easier to massage. But if you want to go just on the pure talent play, what's the best talent play for this team going forward? It's keeping those three big wings together and figuring out the rest later. And figuring out the rest later might mean Jakob Poeltl is not part of the long-term solution for this team. But that doesn't mean he's bad. Doesn't mean he's useless. And it doesn't mean that he wasn't worth a first-round pick a couple seconds in Khem Birch. And again, this trade, I'm going to lose my mind thinking about this trade for the rest of the time. It's so polarizing. Everyone's very, very strong in how they feel about this trade. And I think it can be kind of an in-between thing where it's not perfect. The fit is not great. It's probably a case of the Raptors making a move at the wrong time for the wrong center and amplifying their mistake by not keeping Fred VanVleet to have that pull-up shooting threat to pair with Jakob Poeltl. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a place on this team. And it doesn't mean that they're not better with him on the team than they would have been with whatever center solutions they might have figured out outside of that. I don't think there was a big signing coming in the offseason. They didn't have cap space. It might have been a mid-level they throw at some center. Mid-level centers routinely do not perform. Aaron Baines, for example, is a pretty recent example of that. Jakob Poeltl would not have been available for the mid-level. He's a better player than that. He would have earned some scratch. I think, if you look at, lost my train of thought a little bit, but, just getting Jakob Poeltl on this team, it sets it up as a better developmental environment. Even with the imperfect fit, this team can go and actually play real sensible, normal basketball with an actual rim protector, with a real defense that allows them to play within the sort of integrity that you want to see when you have as much defensive talent as they have. That's all opened up by Jakob Poeltl. This is a top 10 defense right now. Jakob Poeltl's existence on it is what allows them to be a top 10 defense. Even with all the wing talent they have, you got to have rim protection, and Jakob Poeltl provides that rim protection in spades. As the Pistons, he completely demolished them yesterday at the rim. It was awesome to see. Having him on the team is good. Is it perfect? No. But think about Jonas Valanciunas. The Raptors went for years with Jonas Valanciunas at the center of those DeMar and Kyle teams. It was never perfect. He couldn't close a lot. There were plenty of playoff games where you're not closing with Jonas Valanciunas because his defensive coverages and pick and roll just weren't there. It was an imperfect fit for a long time for a guy who made pretty reasonable market value money to play center. It's a very similar situation with Jakob Poeltl. It's not perfect, but it's something you can address down the line. And I think the sort of the consensus on Yak has gone so far the other way to start this year. Like I've seen suggestion that he's like a negative contract. Like, no, it's just not true. 20 million bucks in today's day and age, it's going to be barely north of the mid-level exception in a couple years. Like the cap is going up. That's just what starters cost. And Jakob Poeltl is a starting level center. I think this weekend was a really nice reminder of that and a reminder of just how useful he can be on this team, even if he's not a perfect fit alongside the best players. You can figure out perfect fit down the line. Building a team with perfect fit, basically impossible in the NBA. Acquiring players is challenging. Acquiring the exact perfect players, basically impossible. And so I think for now, you live with it, you work with it, you work around the parameters and the limitations that come with it, knowing you can lean on that Scottie, O.G, Pascal front court in big, tight moments of close games. You can do that and have success as they have so far this year. Jakob Poeltl still has a lot of utility on this team. And I think, again, this was a really nice reminder of that this weekend, that this team, despite the imperfection, can absolutely make things work with Jakob Poeltl out there. And then, Dennis Schroder, Gary Trent Jr., the other two guys kind of in the sort of next tier of supporting players on this Raptors squad after the top three guys. Really nice to see Gary Trent Jr. rounding into form all of a sudden, 37% on threes. He shot pretty decently, 4 of 5 on twos in the game against the Pistons. That's good to see. His true shooting still down under 50%, but it's creeping up steadily and he looks a lot more comfortable. And it's just like injecting space into the team. The absence of him the last few games before he got back, so obvious, just the lack of space that was within those second units or those staggered starting units where Gary's in there. He provides space. He makes defenses think. You need to have guys who make defenses think, and he is one of the very few guys on this team who does that when he's standing 30 feet from the basket. So that's great to see. And then Dennis Schroder, not a ton of analysis, just like really glad he looked better over the weekend. He looked really slow, out of step, perhaps a little hurt in the games against the Wizards and Bucks last week. And without Dennis Schroder performing at something resembling what he's done so far this season, this team's dead in the water because they don't have any other point guard play, really. Malachi Flynn's done some nice things here and there. I don't think you're trusting Malachi Flynn to be your starting point guard at any point this year and hoping for good things. Dennis Schroeder's got to be where he's been or close to it for this team to really have a shot. And it was nice to see him bounce back against the Celtics. Obviously, the threes falling for him is massive. You don't expect he's going to go 5 of 11 most nights, but he's been very eager to take those catch and shoot threes that come to him within the flow. Even going 0 of 4 from deep in the game against the Pistons, didn't feel it because he was scoring from 2 really effectively and was able to balance that out. I think, Dennis over the last couple of games, I think dispelled my concerns that he was looking hurt or whatever. Obviously, I'm no doctor. I was just kind of, reading the tea leaves and looking what was in front of me. A guy just not looking like he had the same zip and pop that he had before. The zip and pop is back, and that's a huge thing for the Raptors. So Yak, the big takeaway among the sort of complimentary guys this weekend, but Schroeder and Trent, I think, looking pretty good as well. As the team, once again, I'll use the word coalesce. It's going to take time. Obviously, 13 games. They've had some in and out guys with injury. Things were never going to be super smooth immediately, but we're seeing things kind of gel together a little bit more here. They kind of have a bit more of a plan of what they want to do, some more lineups they can lean on, some different shooting options they can to kind of inject into these lineups. I think we're seeing it come along ever so slowly, but baby steps. You got to have baby steps before you have big, long, bounding steps. We'll come back on the other side, get into the good, the bad, and the to round out this week. We'll talk about Precious Achiuwa. We'll talk about bright colors. Yeah, bright lights, bright colors, overstimulation. And we'll talk about the big week that lies ahead for the Raptors. We'll get to that in just one sec. But first, got to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sports book in North America. You got to go check them out. Right now is a perfect time to score early this NFL season with America's #1 sports book, because FanDuel right now for new customers they're going to get $5 back. You're going to get $150 back for every $5 money line bet you win. So what you got to do is just put down a $5 winning money line bet. You get your $150 in bonus bets back on that offer, and all of a sudden you have all these bonus bets money to throw on other stuff. Thanksgiving's coming up down in the States this Thursday. A great time to sit around, watch football, do nothing, and put a little money down on some football if you want to go do that. Maybe you want to go and put a little money on the Raptors game. Maybe you're going to a Raptors game sometime in the near future. You want to liven up the in-game experience. You can go and do that. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So you can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon right now and kick off the NFL season. I guess the stretch run of the NFL season, Thanksgiving. You're getting down to the wire, the nitty gritty. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, rounding out the show here with the good, the bad, and the way we round out every post-game episode of the pod here. Of course, 2 games wrapped into one. We're just kind of pulling the big bits from the games against the Celtics and Pistons. So let's start with the good. A thing I liked from this weekend. Precious Achiuwa. Nice stuff. Again, like this guy, I'm never going to be able to quit him. I just can't. For every hilarious mistake driving the ball and kicking it off his foot, or just making an erroneous drive into a set defender or whatever it might be, he just balances it out with so many thrilling, dazzling plays on both ends of the floor. That his defense in the Celtics game was really nice. A couple just clean strips of Jason Tatum, not an easy thing to do, but Precious was there to do it. He can defend anybody, right? He can defend on the wings. He can defend bigs. He can even pinch hit and defend guards. He's an incredible defensive player, and the bodily control he has, it's remarkable. He's just an absolute wonder on that end of the floor when he's really engaged. It's oppressive. It makes other opposing players look like they want to cry. On offense, obviously, we know it's an up and down battle, but we're seeing some really nice strides. We've seen a little bit of the experimentation with him as an elbow hub, a lot of work with Malachi Flynn and Gary Trent Jr. in those second units. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think you could probably run more effective stuff, but obviously you got to balance development with winning, and he's producing in pretty interesting ways. In the game against the Pistons, 5 assists to go along with his 12 points, hit 2 of his 4 threes. That's massive. If the threes are falling for Precious Achiuwa, holy hell, it's a game changer. I have maybe kind of given up on him getting back to where he was during the 2021-22 season, where he shot 38, 40% down the stretch on 4 attempts a game. But if he can be 34, 35% on reasonable volume, just take them when they come to him and hit them when they're available. That's a nice thing, because that'll also make his drives that much more effective and hard to guard. And the drives are really nice. He gets that ball at the top of the arc. He can just kind of power his way to the rim because he's really strong and really fast. He's been, pretty impressive on some keeper plays in those dribble handoff situations. Liking what we saw from Precious Achiuwa this weekend. Nice to see him kind of getting back into a rhythm after being out injured. He's huge. Darko Rajakovic talked a lot about him too. He's really hard on him, he says, because of all that he thinks he can do. And it was nice to see him really pop off against the Pistons. Hopefully he can kind of make this into a bit of a trend where he is a reliable, dependable, kind of set your watch to him type of bench player. Setting your watch to Precious Achiuwa feels like a recipe for being late a lot, but when he's on, man, thrilling player to watch, and was really, really good against the Pistons. Nice to see. Let's go to the bad. This is just a minor one. I love the in-season tournament. I love the courts. I think in general, the Raptors court looked really good. I don't love their jerseys. I've talked about that, but that court makes them pop a little bit more than they would on basically any other surface. So that's fine. But my God, was anyone else just horribly overstimulated because they didn't seem to realize that the ad boards around the arena were going to reflect off of the court like the sun reflects off the Arctic? Just really, really hard to watch at times, especially when there was green ads on the video boards, just kind of just glaring off of the floor. A matte finish would have been maybe an all right idea. I don't know. I'm not a floor paint expert, but I would hope that they kind of work on the lighting situation. Frankly, give me theater lighting for every Toronto Raptors game. Dumb down the lights and the overstimulation in the exterior parts. What's on the court should be lit like it's a theater. Make it beautiful, and kind of dull down the rest of the stimulation, the rest of the arena. And I would be perfectly all right with that. But yeah, that's the one drawback of the in-season tournament so far is I could barely watch that Celtics game for spots because of how just flashy and bright and just very in your face the lights off of the floor were. Would hope to see some sort of rectification of that issue. Let's get to the rounded out. Big week for the Raptors. I'm excited to see the Raptors this week play some contemporaries. So far, they've played 13 games. They're 6-7. They have a barely positive point differential. And frankly, you'll take that considering the schedule they've played so far. So far this year, the Raptors, per ESPN.com, 5th toughest schedule in the NBA. They were 3rd going into yesterday's game against the Pistons. They've played kind of a gauntlet. If you look at just like the breakdown of who they've played, 6 of their 13 games, almost half of their games, have come against the presumed top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, who are currently the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference by standings. The Bucks, the Celtics, and the Sixers. They have played they've played over half of their games against those teams on the schedule for this year already in 13 games. That's nutty. They've played 2 more games against West contenders in Minnesota and Dallas, who I think are both very good teams. And then you've played 5 games against the absolute dregs, the Bulls, the Blazers, the Spurs, the Wiz, the Pistons. Sucks you're only 3-2 in ththose games. They could have been easily 4-1 if that Bulls game didn't go so awry, so hilariously late in that one. 3-2 against the very, very bad teams. You want better than that, but still 6-7 after the gauntlet they've been through. Really interesting. And it's been hard to kind of gauge and feel out where this team sits within the East because they haven't played any of their teams that are kind of alongside them in that battle for, 6th seed or play in or whatever. However you think the Raptors figure into this whole thing, they've not played any of their contemporaries just yet. And I'm fascinated to see what it's going to look like this week. That is, you have the Magic on Tuesday in a must-win in-season tournament game. That's super fun. You get the Pacers and you have the Raptors on Wednesday. I think both will be on back-to-backs. That'll be a fun one. Looking forward to checking that out. There will be the Pacers are just like so fun to watch. They had an awful game against the Magic yesterday. I wonder if the Magic gave a bit of a blueprint. Like that Pacers team can't defend anybody. Like I think the Raptors will have a nice half-court performance. They'll also probably run a whole lot because the Pacers run a whole lot. They just play like a breakneck speed going both ways. And so I wonder if that matchup might actually play into the Raptors' hands. Can you stick OG on Tyrese Halliburton and ruin his day a little bit? Does Dennis Schroder help ruin a Tyrese Halliburton day? Can you force some misses and run? Like that's a really, really fascinating matchup, kind of a styles make fights type of thing. Looking forward to that game Wednesday against the Pacers. You got the in-season tournament against the Bulls on Friday. That's not a contemporary. The Bulls stink. Then you got the Cavs, you got the Nets in their last in-season tournament game. You got the Suns, who are a good team, not perfect. Certainly one the Raptors have had some success with in recent years as well, albeit very different iterations than the current Phoenix Suns. But either way, at least 3 of their next 6 games, depending on what you feel about the Cavs and the Suns and the Bulls, but at least 3 are against teams that are kind of in their class within the NBA, within the Eastern Conference. And seeing how they perform in those games, I think, will be pretty telling and give us a lot more sort of, actionable information when it comes to the ongoing process that is data collection of what this team looks like, with Scottie Barnes looking like the player he looks like, this sort of new normal. They're in the information accrual phase as to what works, what doesn't, what's got to stick, what's not going to stick. And those games are going to be as informative as any have been so far this year. Really looking forward to those. By the way, a bonus good. The Raptors losing by just 3 to Boston, a game I think we all expected they'd lose in the in-season tourney. But hey, man, they've kept the integrity of their in-season tournament bid intact because of the point differential. Just losing by 3, they currently are working all right with the point differential. The Magic are a -8. If you can beat the Magic, that's going to eliminate the Magic, first of all, from any contention in the tournament. You got the Nets, who are 2-1 right now. That's the final game of the in-season tournament for the Raptors. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. But I think, the in-season tournament's working. I'm fascinated. I'm doing math of point differentials and group stage wins and losses and head-to-heads and all this stuff. It's awesome. I love it. And really cool that the Raptors were able to not totally ruin themselves by losing by like 25 on Friday and putting themselves in a massive hole to have to dig out of. The point differential matters, and being -3 going into their 3 easier games on the slate, you could do worse than what the Raptors are looking at. And of course, if they lose to the Magic tomorrow, it's all over and they'll be toast anyway. So hope they can win. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back again on Tuesday with another episode of the show. Not sure what we'll talk about yet. It's an off day, or it's a lead into a game day. So we'll figure out something fun, something big picture. And then Wednesday, we'll break down the game against the Magic. Vivek and I are actually going to go and do a podcast right after the in-season tournament game against Orlando. So you'll have that to look forward to. We'll have a game recap on Thursday with Jamar Hines. That'll be tons of fun. We'll get Katie Heindel mixed in somewhere as well. But with that, we will leave off with we'll leave you to the rest of your day, that is, and round out today's show. Thank you for supporting, follow, subscribe, rate, review, etc. Wherever you get your podcasts, it's always appreciated. Please go and join the Discord. Link is in the description. It's right there. It's free to do. We'd love to see you in there as well. We'll talk to you again Tuesday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye.